I'm Deborah Simmons, born and raised in London. I love London, but I have an insatiable appetite for traveling and experiencing new and different places. Yeah, I love travel. And after a number of years working as an insight consultant for a variety of boutique agencies in London, I started my company, Camino Insight, which is a consultancy dedicated to helping organizations better understand their audiences and to generate insight to help them develop their brands, products and services. And over the last 3 years in particular, I've been engineering the business to focus more specifically on emerging lifestyles, I think is probably a good umbrella term for it. So future of work, urban design. It's an area that I'm personally and professionally passionate about. So I'm really excited to be one of the people who is driving this area forward. Well, just over 3 years ago now, I decided for my own sort of lifestyle needs and desires to go on a year-long remote working trip, basically. So I lived for a year or just over a year as a digital nomad with a community of other digital nomads from all around the world. And we lived in a different city each month for a year. We traveled with an organization called Remote Year. And it was a real experiment because although I'd worked for myself for quite a number of years already, so a lot of the work I did was remote anyway. A lot of the time clients do want me there face-to-face running discussion groups or interviews of various others, workshops, that sort of thing. So I was quickly very aware that I wasn't going to have quite as much client work during this year as I would usually have. So I kind of saw it as a bit of an opportunity, really. And actually, very quickly, very soon into the trip, a lot of the people I was traveling with were having issues with their employers or their businesses who had said initially, okay, yeah, we're happy for you to do this. And then, they had cold feet. It was, they were finding the relationship, managing the remote working relationship difficult. And people lost their jobs, talented, productive people lost their jobs for no reason other than they were not sitting in the same physical space as their employer. So as I said, I saw this as a really good opportunity and really important to do this work to shed new light or to shed light on this new digital nomad movement and help bring new insight to the entrepreneurs and established businesses that saw an opportunity to serve this new movement and this new audience, and they were all kind of clamoring to be the first ones in that space. So this is where sort of co-working and co-living and real estate, it's very relevant for them because I see so many new co-working spaces popping up. There's so many new plans for co-living spaces that are being challenged by councils. Is this the right use for the space? Is this not just glorified student housing that you want to charge, 3 or 4 times the premium for? So this is where I kind of see it being really relevant for real estate and sort of urban planners. And tech companies, of course, were, jumping on this straight away. So I saw a lot of new businesses starting on very shaky ground because they were just going from maybe an idea they'd had or their own personal experiences, but they didn't understand the audience and the audience's wider needs. So that's where I felt I could really help add value, was to do this longitudinal ethnographic study, living the lifestyle myself, but also doing research as I traveled to really understand, sort of in a very in-depth way what this was all about. And then that could help these businesses, as the kind of framework for their plans, really. I feel that it affects workspaces in a couple of main ways. So first of all, you have established businesses that are being put under pressure, increasing pressure to create more flexible working arrangements with their staff, meaning that they need to give serious thought to how their employees are able to work effectively when, say, some people are in the office and some aren't. So a hybrid office is what we would call that. Or when everybody is working remotely. So we would call that a fully distributed office. So this isn't just about suiting the needs of digital nomads. Of course, it's indeed for anybody for whom a flexible working arrangement is favored. Parents, possibly people who are living or working away from their main office hub, and many other people, you know, at different times in their lives might need to work away from the main office. And then on the other side of that coin, you need to have provisions for those people who, like small businesses, entrepreneurs, startups who don't have a fixed work base, but they do want to have a space that kind of they see specifically as their workspace. And places where they feel that they can come to be productive and have a more structured, secure environment that offers everything that they need to enable them to do their jobs, but with sort of flexible tenure. So although some of the needs are consistent across all types of workers, many of the needs that they have from their working environment are quite specific to the job that they do, or just to the environment that they feel most productive and happy working in, which is also a really important thing to consider, because we're all different. And if you put everybody in the same working environment, in the same hours, with the same stimulus, if you like, some people, that's going to work perfectly for some people, but then inevitably there are going to be other people for whom those hours they're not their most productive time to work. The environment, the temperature, the noise, the lighting, it's not right for everybody. So why should everybody be expected to do the same, to work as effectively in the same environments? And I think, what works for one person is hell for another. So I think it's a really important thing for, anybody who's designing a workspace to consider that. Essentially, though, when we're talking about co-working spaces, it's important to have distinct zones and a very clear charter on how each area is intended to be used. So, there's a lot more that we could talk about that. I don't know quite how much detail you want me to go into, but I think that's the important thing, is know who you're designing for, what their needs are, and then make sure everybody's aware of, how this space is supposed to be used. When we're thinking about living spaces for digital nomads, these are people who are going to be away from their family and friends a lot of the time. People want to feel at home, even though they might be traveling for new experiences. They still want to feel at home when they're in a new place. And that, I think, is something that's quite important to think about, like what makes people feel at home. It's not, I can certainly say, for me, after living in so many places and traveling, for a long time, not seeing my family and friends from home, home wasn't about the place anymore. It became, for me, about the people that I was with, because they were the constant that I had in my life. And I kind of felt at some points, I could be anywhere right now. It wouldn't matter, because the people are my home. But that's different again for everybody. For some people, it might be their working environment. For some people, it might be their living environment, or it might even be, just having a gym, a consistent gym practice or exercise practice, and all of these different things can be home. So I think that's something that kind of has to be explored with the audience that you're designing for. Digital nomads and remote workers who will all be using the same spaces are not all the same. But that said, there are some fundamental principles that do kind of need to be considered and incorporated into these sorts of spaces. So for co-working spaces, I think, yeah, really, really important, as I mentioned, to have clearly defined zones. So this is the quiet space, this is a communal space. You know, that's it at the most basic level, but it goes, you know, there's a lot more dimension. Another absolute must, cool rooms that are fit for purpose. I can't tell you the number of co-working spaces that I worked in where they either didn't have any cool rooms, or they had cool rooms that were an afterthought, basically, at best. They were uncomfortable, they were claustrophobic, they were not soundproofed, they were not made with the user's needs in mind. Personally, I don't have a lot of calls in my day-to-day. Some of the people I was traveling with spend 80% of their working day on the phone. So important to get that right from the beginning. Natural light and outside space. Again, you know, this is like the most consistent thing that people talk about. Comfortable chairs, comfortable desks, comfortable other areas to sit in that aren't as formal. Really clear charter on how the space is designed to be used so that everybody is on the same page. Provision of food, drinks, tech support if possible. Very helpful when you're somebody who is totally reliant on your one laptop, you know, one phone, one charger. Sort of, you know, this stuff is real. Communal spaces where people can meet and socialize and network more informally within the space, and also some events that help people to network and collaborate on a more professional level. A strong kind of ethical charter to appeal to the nature of socially aware workers as well. So just as I was speaking, I was also sort of thinking about the fact that that's not necessarily to do with the building design itself. There are obviously important things about kind of how buildings are designed, but once you have that space, this is kind of how people want to use it, I suppose. I would say lifestyle, absolutely. And it's a universal trend, there's no question. I would say it's been led more by North America, partly due, I would say, to their income levels, their tax arrangements, which can be really favorable for those living outside of the US for a certain duration. And because there just seems to be kind of more openness around attitudes to flexible working. But saying that, I've met digital nomads from every corner of the earth. And I would say it is more to do with the individual, what they want for themselves and their background, or than their background. And also it's being led by people who are in what you might call a nomad ready profession. So, you know, most of the time when I meet other digital nomads, I don't need to ask, they're usually software developers. I mean, there are lots of other people as well, but 9 times out of 10, they're software developers. You know, they're not having to kind of change their life or their work to have this lifestyle, and they also get paid really, really well. But yeah, I would certainly say this is a universal trend. So the lifestyle point, being a digital nomad is definitely a lifestyle. So it's one where working and social lives blend. Priorities have shifted. Traditional ways of living are rejected, at least for a period of time. Experiences are valued over possessions. It's about living for now, not for the future. So as we all know, life can change in the blink of an eye. You know, this is what's happening now. We've all had to adjust, like, in crazy ways over the last few weeks. Nothing's certain, nothing is forever. And, you know, really the sentiment is about embracing it now. Fill your boots, as we say. And in some ways also it's about stripping back and only having the possessions that you really need. You know, basically what can fit in a suitcase. And you do come to realize quite quickly that, you know, you don't really need that much more than that if you're, you know, well, not a parent, for example. Obviously, that's important distinction to make. These things are not as easy for people who have families, but yeah, you really don't need as much, and it feels very freeing to kind of let go of those, you know, wardrobes full of clothes and cupboards full of items that you don't use and you haven't looked at for a long time. It's like a weight is lifted, really. So it's really about enjoying the more simple things in life, but with all the tech that makes that possible. The current situation is clearly having a huge impact on digital nomads in some ways, and very little in others. So these are the people who are most adept at working remotely. So where others go into panic mode, work, you know, doesn't actually necessarily change for a lot of digital nomads. So in that sense, they should be able to continue their working lives with little adjustment. On the other hand, the ability to travel, of course, has been hugely affected by COVID-19. So a lot of people have found themselves being stuck somewhere. Maybe their visas are only valid for a certain amount of time, or it's brought up other issues for people who travel continuously and have no home base. So actually, I was supposed to be coming back from Costa Rica today, but I came back a couple of weeks ago instead. And at the point that I ended up aborting the trip, I was living in a house with 14 other digital nomads, mostly from the US and Canada, but a few from other places as well. And my first thought, you know, having a home base in London was, and my family in London was, okay, I need to get back to London. But for some of those people who travel continuously, it wasn't, you know, such an obvious choice of where to go or whether to stay or what to do. And yeah, that made it pretty difficult for them. But work-wise, most of them were unaffected. On the other side of things, companies that have been built around the digital nomad movement are also facing huge losses as their revenue relies heavily on people being able to move around from city to city and country to country. And I'm not sure how many of those are going to bounce back, as they're predominantly new businesses, startups. You know, maybe they've just been trading for a few years and they're not even making a profit at the moment. So they are having to strip back to their bare bones and try to sort of wait it out, and hopefully not fold completely. So, you know, in the short term, I think it's going to affect a lot of these businesses really harshly. In the long term, I don't believe this current situation will negatively impact the digital nomad lifestyle. If anything, what I've seen on social media over the last few weeks is more and more people realizing that it is possible to do their jobs remotely. And it's more realistic for them than they realized. So I would say watch this space. I think once things have died down and it's safe to travel again, and assuming that not all of the airlines have gone bankrupt, yeah, I think actually we'll see more and more people adopting this lifestyle. This would have been the case anyway, but I think the trajectory will be, you know, even steeper.